Hi Ian, lovely to meet up with you and spend the day working on your game. Just a quick recap on the key points that we covered as promised towards the end of the session. So when we looked at the swing at the start of the day, we had a number of key issues. First of all, we were creating an artificially wide arc. The emphasis here with you had been on arms straight as a backswing piece and very much weight forward, shoulder down, and we can see that those three areas are overemphasized. The arms straight in the 10-word template really, with a better player or a more established player, refers to a through swing feel. If you get a beginner who's a complete beginner, they do flex their arms too much both sides of the ball. But with a better player, we tend to see arms that are straight enough on the way back and then flex a little bit on the way through. So first concern was this overly wide takeaway where the club stays very low to the ground. The right arm's very straight for a long period of time. If we're not careful, that can lead to some disconnection. And it just means that we've got to load things later in the swing. And you can see there that as you transition, you don't really add any load to the wrist. The wrist starts to get uncocked pretty quick. So that was concern number one. We wanted to get the right arm accumulator 1 and the wrist accumulator 2 to load more incrementally from P1 setup to P3 when the left arm's parallel with the ground. This would make it much easier then for you to turn the shoulders on a tilted angle, staying centered, which brings us to our next sort of point that we talked about. There's a little bit of translation off the golf ball. You can see the center of the shoulder turn marked by the white dot. You do move away from that a little bit. But the big concern, if you look at your head in relation to that box, if we are turning, extending and left tilting at the correct rates, our head would stay in that box. Now, whilst there's a little bit of movement off in the latter part of the swing, or latter part of the backswing, which suggests we need a little bit more extension, there's a tremendous drop down, and that's my main concern, the fact that the head drops so much. That can be a lack of extension, but in your case, it's left tilting too much too soon. So that way too much emphasis on left shoulder down, left knee coming sort of purely towards the golf ball, flexing forward, and this is bringing everything down at just too high a rate. You're also working really hard there to stay centered because of that takeaway we've just discussed. So we've got a loss of height in the backswing, the head's dropping down too much. We could extend more, but looking at your image there, you're extending nicely. There's no sort of flexion kept in the spine. The right leg's straightening. So this is a case of a player left tilting just a little bit too much, a little bit too fast, a little bit too soon in the backswing. So the first thing we did, and we'll look at the swing here on the right, is we put the block down behind the golf ball, about 18 inches back. Shows you how to mark that out using your golf club so that it's in the same place every time. And the idea is to just miss the object that's behind the golf ball on the way back. That encourages the club to ascend quicker, the hands to ascend quicker, and the right arm and the wrists to begin hinging a little bit sooner as well. So if we look at the point P3 when the left arm's parallel with the ground, we can see a marked difference between those two swings. We've got much more loading of the wrists, accumulator 2. We have I'll just bring that back a little bit for you. A completely different look to the right arm relative to the side of the body at P2. We've not got as much daylight between the arms and the side, like we see here. The arc is not artificially wide. We've also de-emphasised the left shoulder down piece of the backswing, and you can see that the head now is a little bit more stable within that box. So I'm not saying that you don't want the left shoulder to work down, we just don't need it to work down as much, as soon, and as aggressively as we're seeing at the start of the session. So again, marked difference in the way we're loading the accumulators on the way back. Left tilting at a much steadier rate. See a little bit of that going in there now on the right. You know, and this is going to take a little bit of time to settle into your game. You spent a lot of time working on that left shoulder down piece. And, you know, you're showing signs there, P1 to P3, things are dramatically improved. And then it's just that last little bit there now where we've maybe got to extend for a little bit longer. Don't be frightened of that left knee coming in a little bit. It's allowed to do that, remember. But the backswing itself's looking tidier at that point. The key piece in the downswing for you was separating the lower and upper centre. I sent you the images across. Hopefully that made sense to you when you read through the verbiage at the bottom. Really what we're looking for here is a stable upper axis with a translating lower axis. So during the transition, we want the upper centre to stay stable, and we want the lower centre, the hips, to drive forward. So we want to introduce that linear movement. We can see at the start of the session the tendency is to move forward with both centres. When we do that, the wrist angles start to get dumped very early, and then we've got to spring up dramatically through the hip. That was one of the feelings that you talked about. Now what I'm doing on the right is I've got the club to the side of your head, and I'm just preventing the upper centre drifting forward as much. And we're now starting to see, rather than, I'm just going to get rid of these dots, rather than the upper centre and lower centre being, generally speaking, a little bit, you know, more over the top of one another. Upper centre's gone forward, lower centre's gone forward, no separation. What we've got now is a little bit more axis tilt. The lower centre has moved forward, and the upper centre has moved forward a little bit less due to the resistance that I'm applying to the side of your head. This has a marked effect on the way that you deliver the golf club into the back of the ball. Quality of strike will improve, much more potential for speed and height, and you'll find it much easier to keep the club attacking the ball from the inside. If we look at these two swings, I'm just going to play these through now. As we come through the hit, you can see how the player on the right looks much more tucked under into the finish. And if we go back to P6, that delivery position, the player on the right gives the impression that there's a lot more linear movement in the lower body. You know, and in reality, when we look at where the centre of the hips is located on the right swing and the left swing, yeah, there's a little difference, maybe an inch, not a massive difference. So the big visual difference comes from the separation of the two centres. So remember, what we want to look for during the downswing is an upper centre of the shoulder turns that's fixed, and a lower centre that's moving progressively forward to give us that axis tilt that we're looking for coming into impact. And you're seeing an improvement there on your right. You're seeing much more separation between the two centres. As with the left shoulder down, etc., it's just a case of sticking to the process, sticking to the pieces that we discussed. Don't get sidetracked. Just become better at doing those pieces and gradually develop it within your game. I think personally, if you look at the one on the right, now we did tweak the foot position a little bit as well. Remiss of me to miss that, but we turned both feet out approximately 20 degrees at setup. The whole thing on the right is starting to tidy up. There's a lot of other little things there that are starting to change based on the main pieces that we worked on. So we're trying to separate the two centres. We're trying to left tilt in the backswing at a lesser rate. We talked about the rates at which we do things, and we discussed turning, tilting, and extending, and we used the number 5 as a reference. So if we're going to stay centred during the backswing, we need to turn at 5, extend at 5, and left tilt at 5. Totally irrelevant unit, just a nice way for you to visualise things. What I'm seeing with the player on the left when you first came in the studio is I'm seeing a player who is turning and extending at 5 but left tilting at 10. So there's way too much emphasis on that. It's not that we're not doing the pieces we need to do, it's just that one piece is overpowering the rest. What I'm seeing here now on the right is a much more balanced backswing where the turn, the left tilt and the extension are being carried out at a much more suitable rate, allowing the player to stay more centred, maintain his inclination to the ground. And then from there, we want to try and separate those two centres during the downswing, which gives us that tucked look into the finish. I think, the video recaps are good. I think the images that we send across to you are essential to keep working on. The difference in the two finish positions there is marked. The arms are much more under control. The lower body is looking much tidier. And there's much more extension in the spine. Good luck with it. Look forward to watching this one progress. Hopefully you can send me some footage in the coming weeks just to see how things are going. If yourself or Adam have got any questions that you want to ask, feel free to do so. And hopefully in the near future we can get together again and do some further work on your game. Well done.